Hello, friend. The mystical American Patriots Society is transmitting to you from beneath 4 million cubic feet of solid granite, in the burning heart of the Yellowstone caldera. This is a variety program for normal sandwich-eating Americans with some concerns about living in a deranged, post-Christian technocracy. So, keep your third eye on the sky and your ear to the ground, as Sumo and Smokestack connect your main brain vein to a higher plane. Are you ready? Stand by.
Helen Keller's fake. I can't. Anything is. You're all. You know me and computers. I don't like them.
Yeah, I'm with you there, buddy.
I've been trying for like the entire time we've been doing this podcast to figure out how to turn myself off of snooze.
Oh, on Slack? Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like it's by my name. There's a little Z's button, like I'm asleep.
Yeah.
And I've been trying to, and it won't. I think that means that you're not allowed to message me.
It does, yeah.
So I can't get anything from you.
Mm-hmm.
And then I don't know, like a year I've been clicking, and I move the arrow around the screen. And I click in other places, and sometimes I click with the other clicker, and still nothing. And like right now I can hear you, but your face is frozen in like this very intense manner.
Well, we can fix the notifications issue. Do you know? You see the little icon
right now.
Okay. You don't want to do that live on the air. That's not you saying that's not good podcasting.
No. I was just noting.
Yeah.
Can you see me? Am I moving?
Yes, you're in full motion.
Good. So I'm in motion, and you're frozen, which is sort of the way that this relationship started. Really. You in a cryogenic chamber.
Yeah.
And me. So I guess it all works out in the end.
It does. That's beautiful.
I've been feeling pretty good. I have past 4 days.
Mm-hmm.
I've eaten nothing that hasn't come out of a gas station hot box.
Wow.
So I'm feeling pretty energized. I had the fried livers. Pretty good.
Yeah.
I always eat your organ meat.
You just gave yourself away geographically by saying there's fried livers at the gas station.
No, that's not true, because there are fried livers at the gas station over the entire country.
No.
But most people don't eat out of gas station hot boxes, so they don't know this.
Mm-hmm.
But gas station hot box food is very uniform.
Interesting.
I also had, hey, how about this? Does this give away any location? A Crispitos.
I don't know what that is.
See, most people don't. A Crispito is a common gas station hot box food. And it is, imagine a burrito,
mm-hmm.
but instead of a tortilla, like a cakey substance,
mm-hmm.
wrapped up on the grade of meat that they wasn't quite good enough to get into a Taco Bell hard shell taco. Like just one thing below that.
Okay, yeah.
And they wrapped it up really tightly, and then they deep fry it suddenly so it becomes really crispy.
Mm-hmm.
It's delicious. It's like a burrito, but it's so crispy. It's a Crispito.
Mm.
So that was good. So I've got that. So I have high energy. I'm like Trump. I'm just beating coronavirus.
Yeah. Good for
you. Caloric intake, fast food McDonald's.
I was so proud of him yesterday. Talking about don't be afraid of Trump, of coronavirus.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's good, and we need a little bit of that before President Kamala puts us all in jail.
We need like a glimmer of hope.
Yeah,
before it all comes down.
Everyone's going to jail with Kamala.
She does like putting people in jail, doesn't she?
Yeah, our podcast is going to be illegal.
Yep.
And walking outside without a mask is illegal. And being black will be illegal, as will being white.
Yeah.
All races will be illegal.
Mm-hmm.
And she's just going to put us in jail. And the whole country will just be in jail. And that's okay.
I went canoeing yesterday without a mask on.
Really?
Yeah, it was awesome.
And you caught the corona from the fish?
No. I'm not going to live in fear of corona. I'm just going to
because Donald told you.
Donald inspired me so much that I said, you know what? I'm canoeing today down a river. I ain't wearing no mask.
Yeah, I don't know. But President Kamala will put us in jail. But that got me to thinking about I was thinking about Kamala putting everyone in jail while I was outside running under the moon. And while I was outside running under the moon, I also saw some planets.
Cool.
I saw 3 planets. I saw Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars, and the moon. And you know what's interesting about the planets that most people don't even realize?
No.
They're all in a line.
Oh, like in a flat plane?
They're in a plane.
Yeah.
Right. And that plane is in the plane of the solar system. And unless you're at the equator, you're always off that plane. Right? That makes sense?
That's interesting that the plane of the planets is aligned with the rotational plane of the Earth.
Right. Well, that's because everything's, if you spin a record player round and round, everything on the record player for long enough gets spinning that way too. Yeah. So anyway, I was thinking, and I was walking, and it was a clear night, and I felt all crooked. Crooked? Yeah, because I was looking at this plane, and I was like off kilter of the plane. I was standing straight up, and it was like this, like, I don't know, 30 degrees. And I felt like I really should be lying in the plane of the solar system, and it distressed me greatly for like 15 minutes that I wasn't. Because I was like, why am I felt like I was like leaning to the side. Do you when you run, gravity had me up. I was like, what? When you go running, do you have a PVC pyramid around you? No, maybe that would help. I don't, but I did feel crooked, and I thought, so what I did was I found a little hill that was almost at that angle. And I just sort of laid on it. And then I felt like I was pretty close to soul, and I felt like I felt better. Like I felt like I had more energy. Well, you got to take it where you can get it. So I think that's maybe a thing. Like maybe this is how we can monetize this podcast, rather than the traditional route of people that have paranormal podcasts, which is where we hawk silver at poor people, or tell them to buy water filters. We could have one of these new fad esoteric health crazes, like ear candling, or or whatever. And I'm gonna call it solar planing. And we sell you this table, and you put in your position on Earth. Yeah. And then all through the year, it just auto aligns itself with the plane of the solar system, and you lay on it. And then imagine that we can even start like a cult, because all over the world, everyone's going to be on the same plane, right? At different levels. And you can like, even though I'm in a ball, I'm at different parts. I'm lying on the same plane as my friends and sisters down in Australia. Give or take. Wouldn't the ones in Australia have to be upside down? Right. So maybe it has straps on it. Right. Well, that's a good question. In solar planing, do you need to be one way up or down, like face up or face down, or does it matter? Obviously, it matters. I've only done it the one time, but I will say it did feel good. I was like, now I feel at balance, because I was looking up at the stars, and they were at the same. I was on the same plane. Not the stars. The stars don't count, but the planets. And I felt a lot better. So maybe if we get people to do this, it will also feel better. And then all around, we can have like a Zoom meeting where we're all on the same plane, you know. And and I'm like in Oregon, and
Yeah.
you're in Kentucky, and we have someone in Brazil,
Mm-hmm.
and someone else in China, and we all know because we all have the table that we're all on the same plane, even though we would normally be talking to each other at pointing away at different orthogonals from the sphere.
Mm-hmm.
I think this could go somewhere. I mean, we could charge a lot for that table. I mean, we could charge. I mean, imagine how much a table that puts you at solar level would be.
Well, contact us at mapsoc.org if you are interested in one of these tables, and tell us what you think it should cost.
I mean, I'm thinking it should cost at least, because it's a motorized system that also connects to like your GPS.
Yeah,
it should cost at least $1,000.
Yeah.
And then it would be like a chiropractor's table, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that has those functions too. Like maybe depending on which planet is directly in front of you in the plane, it plays different musics. I don't know.
If it can double as a suspension table for people with back problems, yep.
Well, it would almost have to. I mean, yeah. If the face up or face down matters, it has to do a full. It has to be able to do a full 180.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be a complex table, but it'll be solar level, and you will feel better, guys. I'm telling you. I look outside and look at right now in the northern hemisphere anyway. Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars are clearly visible at night, and just sort of lay your body in the plane and see if you don't feel better. I'm telling you, I was like, because I was like running down the road, and I was like, I feel all off balance. Because this plane suddenly was like so obvious to me.
Was that this morning?
No, that was a few days ago.
Okay.
The plane was so obvious to me, and I was like, I mean, this all could just be the side effects of 4 days of gas station hotbox food.
It might be connected.
But yeah, I thought that would be really good. I don't know if anyone has any manufacturing skills out there. Get in touch so we can make this a reality and get like an infomercial or whatever. But that I was also, when you solar level, things become clear. Like you think a lot better when you're on plane. When you're on plane, #on plane, things just feel better. And I realized while I was lying on the hill on plane that everyone that gets on TV and says there must be life in the universe because of how big it is a silly person.
Yeah.
And you hear this all the time from like Neil deGrasse Tyson's to what's his name, Professor Periwinkle or whatever.
I don't know what you're talking about.
The one that he had a show for a while.
Bill Nye, the science guy.
Bill Nye, the science guy who has no science degrees. I think he has a degree in mechanical engineering, like a bachelor's degree. He gets on. He says this, and Michio Kaku or Cacao or whatever. Mm-hmm. All the famous TV science men. Whenever they talk about stuff, they'll go, "Oh, well, there must be life in the universe because look at there's millions and billions of stars and galaxies and billions and billions and millions," and they just say these words.
Yep.
But it's like, okay, but let's just go with everything is completely natural. There's no, we're not talking about any creator. We're not talking about any plans. We're not talking about any simulations, right? It's just pure materialism. If you say the size of the universe demands that there is more life out there, the other part of that equation is like, well, how likely is life to spontaneously regenerate? Right, because you have to have both sides of that equation. Mm-hmm. So if the number of places on the universe, the number of planets that life could could start was like 10 to the 22, but the odds of life occurring on any given planet is 1 over 10 to the 27. Then we'd still be the only people here.
That's a good point.
I mean, because you think about it, they say, oh, because we would have like recency bias. Because we would imagine like, well, we were the only case in the universe where life started. And then we just assume that our experience is normal. And, we'd say, well, if it happened here, it happened everywhere. But really, we were like the one case. But you would never know you're the one case, right? Because you don't have access to all the other places where it didn't happen.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Like,
it does.
Imagine you had a key. All right, so imagine an infinite series of prisoners inside cells, and they can't see each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they all have a minute to escape their cell when they're all given a hairpin, right? And so the hairpin has a 10 to the minus 27 chance of opening the lock, right? And there are 10 to the 22 prisoners. Well, they all got a minute or they're going to die. And they go and go. And one of them gets free like on the first second because it just random odds. And he bursts through. He's like, oh, that was easy. And he doesn't know about it. And everyone else, and like 10 to the 22 minus one person all died. And he's like, yeah, that was nothing. You know? It's like life must be everywhere. Anyone could do that.
Right.
And he just so happened the atoms of his hairpin, by complete random chance, just happened to line up perfectly to bust the lock near instantly. Whereas it's actually very difficult, bordering on impossible, to get out of it with a hairpin. He just had so many chances, and he was the one that won. And because he has no ability to see any of the other prisoners, he assumes it's an easy task.
Well, if it really was an infinite number of prisoners, then there would be others.
Right. I'm just saying that it's not infinite. It's 10 to the 22.
Okay.
I think we said, because that's what they say is many stars or galaxies in the universe or whatever. So that doesn't. So like, yeah, we don't, unless we know the other side of that equation. Like, you know how many places there are for life to start, but unless you know the other side of how likely life is to start, then you can't really say anything about how many species there are on other planets.
Yeah.
Like we may be, from a purely statistical point, in a purely materialistic universe, the only ones or maybe so rare that they're like one in every other galaxy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like we're here, and then it's just pretty lonely, except for like maybe there's somebody else way, 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 way far away. But the odds that we'll ever meet them is near impossible. Because then you think, this is my anti-UFO rant. So some days I get on UFOs are everywhere, and some days I say it's actually impossible. But like so if you think about it, the lifespan of a civilization of a species isn't infinite. So we would have to come to spacefaring time in the same time span that the other people were in order to meet. Otherwise, we just miss each other, like strangers passing in the night.
Mm.
You know. And that song plays as we drift past the just now dead civilization of an alien race that we'll never see because they're already gone.
It's horribly depressing.
Isn't it? When you think about this stuff, you can get, as a side note, you know, if you go into Google and you type in song that goes do 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 do, and you should do those do's to the best of your approximation, it'll tell you the song, because I never remember the name of that song. And
Google could return you the name of that song from you typing do 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 do.
Yeah, I've done it before. I said the song that goes do 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 do, and you put the appropriate amount of O's, you know, and it'll be like, I think it's, I don't know, the saxophone song, the one saxophone song that everybody knows. But yeah, so think about this is depressing too. So imagine that you're going out to try and find these people, and we discussed on the alien travel episode that like relativity really messes with you.
Mm-hmm.
So you could do this with human technology now, in theory, if you could build the ship and you had enough fuel. You accelerate at 1G away from Earth for 60 years. You can, because you are constant acceleration, you can get, like you get 60 years, you accelerate for 30 and you decelerate for 30, so you stop. You can get to like almost the end of the galaxy,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And if you make your G just a little bit better, you like, 2 or 3, if you could handle, 2 times Earth's gravity or something. You just imagine medically you could do that.
Right.
You could get to like sort of the end of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
But here's what happens when you do that. You start becoming a time traveler as well as a space traveler. And then because while you're moving along, and it's been 60 years for you, it's been like 5 billion for Earth. And so when you come back, if you ever did, everything has been dead for billions of years, and the Earth is now a moment. So it makes space travel really problematic.
It's like, I know we've covered this before, but the insanity of the idea is just so fresh and evergreen. I can't help but laugh at it.
And so, like, then there's aliens moving around. The idea that they're also out there.
Yep.
And then we're passing each other. And like, well, I go past you at 0.99% the speed of light, 0.99 C.
Mm-hmm.
And their little space car is just now decelerating to like 600 miles an hour so it can stop. And it's like, well, bye! Like, you didn't even see each other.
Well, it's like these two groups of entities flying off into the universe. Everybody that they know and all their children ad infinitum will all be dead if they return. And they're looking for the other group, and they may never even see each other.
Right, and the odds of you passing each other is like so small. And then think about this: at a certain point, at a certain speed, because the universe expands faster than the speed of light. At a certain point of travel from Earth, you would reach a place where it would be physically impossible, even if you could travel the speed of light, to get back to Earth.
It's like interstellar space travel is the most complicated and expensive ritual suicide ever conceived by man.
It's very bad. It's very bad. And then you would just be, you would even like outpace. If you just kept going at 1G for long enough, you would like outpace you would as you approach light speed, you basically enter the void of non-existence, because your inertial frame would be so offset from everybody else. This is what I always think about in time travel movies or space travel movies, is that none of this, like, I like Star Trek, but none of it is possible because they're always like talking to Earth, like warp factor 8, and they get on the phone to Earth or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like all those people have been dead for 20 million years.
No, they got to do a wormhole. It's a wormhole.
That's the only way. But even if they're just, because they travel pretty fast at subwarp.
Mm-hmm.
And even just there's two relativities. There's special relativity and general relativity.
Yeah.
And everyone just thinking, but general relativity just involves various gravities. So even if you're just near a big sun or a black hole, as they are like every other episode,
mm-hmm.
you're still experiencing these massive time dilations that no one can, and it's a big mess. So it could be completely plausible that not only are we completely alone in the universe, but also that any attempt to travel very far results in basically traveling into an eternal void of nothing.
The loneliest death ever possible. You're
right.
The last person alive, literally.
I mean, I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. Because there's a certain romance in being like, we sent off a ship and who knows what happened to him. Like who knows? Like, it could be that he becomes like a living Schrodinger's cat. Like he might be dead at the end of the universe, or he might be like witnessing the new Big Bang. I don't know, but we don't know, and so he's doing both.
Right. Well, it's romantic for the people on the ground, but I imagine being in the can, flying through space, and approaching the speed of light forever. It
takes a certain.
It's gonna get old.
It would have to be someone autistic
Yeah.
that didn't care.
Yeah.
Or have,
Just watching his speed tick up on the monitor for 30 years.
Yeah, basically the same as, who went on the Apollo missions.
Yeah.
Because that was the thing. Like Buzz would say, and again, I'm operating in the realm that it happened, which it didn't. But if it did, Buzz was up there like, they should have probably sent like a poet or something up there, because people were always asking us like, how did it feel? And I was like, I don't know. I was just walking around on the moon. Like he talked like a complete autistic person that had no like awe or like care. Like he wasn't like, ooh, this is like mind blowing. I'm up here on the moon looking back at Earth, the first of the species of any species to get off the planet. And then like, I'm out here in the universe, I'm standing at solar level. And then he's just, it all missed him and Buzz. And they had to be told, look, say the one step for man, giant leap for mankind thing, because they would have never thought of that.
Maybe that poet thing was a tell. I mean, what do poets do is they make up beautiful and inspiring things that didn't really happen.
Well, no, a good poet makes up beautiful, inspiring things out of things that did happen.
I guess. Okay.
Right? I mean,
he should have specified a good poet.
Yeah, so they're probably the same kind of people that got on the first. Look, the right stuff is being autistic.
Is it?
That's what the right stuff is. That movie, The Right Stuff. The right stuff is just you having a complete lack of human emotion. That's what but that all gets cured with solar planing. It all gets cured with solar planing.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
You really brought it home there. We're gonna make a lot of money.
We're gonna make a lot of. If you solar plane, you will not be subject to the laws of relativity, and you can travel without destroying the universe. That's what will be on the thing, and then I'll have a little star at the bottom that says that's not actually true. Like a disclaimer.
Sure.
Okay, so I sort of, because we're an off day today. We're having recorded an off day.
Yeah, and extremely early in the morning.
Extremely early. I'm debating whether or not I should talk about Valiant Thor or the realms of the living and the dead.
That's a tough one.
And I'm not sure which way to go, because on the one hand, I don't really understand the realms of the living and the dead.
Mm-hmm.
But there's something there that's more profound.
Man, it's never stopped you before.
That's true.
Yeah.
And then, but on the other hand, I can talk about air quotes Reverend, air quotes Dr. Frank Stranges and his international evangelism crusades, which involved a spaceman from Venus in the Pentagon.
Yeah, that dude's weird.
So I don't know. Look, okay. So here's the thing. So yesterday evening, I signed some mortgage papers, but not because I'm buying a new house. I was refinancing a house. Okay. And do you know what mortgage means?
It's like a vow unto death.
Death pledge. Like mortality.
Right.
Gauge. It's a death pledge. Right. And I was happy, and that goes into the realms of the living and the dead. But I was glad to see through the process that I think America is getting back on track, getting its economy going back, because the level of shady business around the mortgage industry is starting to go back up, which means that we're getting back to. Because, 2008 happened and they tried all these laws to we're going to try and make the mortgage industry more transparent.
Right.
Right. And we're going to make it there's less places for people to screw around and hide things. And I was pleased to see that none of that had any effect at all on the process of buying a house, or because the American economy, don't kid yourself. It's not on factories. It's not on farmers. What the American economy ran on and must run on is people selling bad loans to poor people and retards.
Yeah.
That's what it must be. Until we get back to that, we're not going to be prosperous. You got to sell the loans to people, and it has to be this very Byzantine process. Like there's a stack of papers, like, I don't know, maybe 6 inches high. And they're like, we got to sign all these papers. And some grandma shows up to your place to sign the papers. She brings the papers. She's wearing a shawl. And is there an attorney? No. Because the bank is hired to do the closing, has hired another company. So they don't have to hire an attorney. They just have to have a notary signer to come have a signing instead of a closing, which will be functionally the same. But she's not allowed. She tells you, she hands you a piece of paper at the front that says, I'm not allowed to actually tell you anything about this. And if you have any questions, I can't answer them legally. Nor do I even know the answers. And then they say, but if you have questions, you can call the bank must supply someone to answer them. So then you call the bank and they say, well, we've outsourced that function to this company. And you call them and like, we've outsourced that to this company. And you call them and they say, oh yeah, here's the number of Greta, another grandma, who will now answer your question about the mortgage. And she just got into the business last week. And so I was like, well, now this is an area that's surely not, there's no area here for exploitation of anything.
No.
Or of any shady business. I'm glad the banks learned their lesson and did everything on the up and up. And they're not just outsourcing everything over and over again to everybody until there's some guy working out of a van selling you a mortgage.
Do you maybe mistrust bankers a little bit?
What now?
Do you have a little mistrust of bankers? I'm sensing.
I mean, I don't know that I've ever actually dealt with one. I'm always dealing with some company they've hired to work on their behalf.
Interesting.
Yeah. I guess when you go to the bank, but that's just a teller at the bank.
Yeah.
He's not a banker really.
Low-level functionary.
Yeah, and then anytime you need to do anything bigger with a bank, they're like, oh yeah, well, we hired this financial group. And they're like, well, we hired this thing, And it's just these weird financial products all the way down. But that's good. Like I said, that's good. Because that means the American economy is on the rebound. Because the more nonsense piles we have, like the more GDP.
You stand an X chance of losing your shirt personally, but all of us together will benefit from the boost in GDP from all the graft. Right.
Yeah. It's just it's the biggest grift that there is going. What's
the difference between graft and grift?
One's at solar level and one isn't.
Oh, I've always wondered. Thank you.
Yeah, that's basically it. But so you think about this mortgage death pledge, okay, and then corpus is a body, right? Okay, I'm getting to this, and I don't look. This is something about where Jesus said, "Let the dead bury their dead."
Okay.
Because money's a hologram; it's not real, right? And then also, one of the problems is I've been listening to sovereign citizens.
Yeah, that's a problem.
Who, if you don't know, are these people that have this. But see, the thing about everybody is there's almost one little bit of truth in almost everything they're saying.
Agree.
Even how ridiculous it is.
Yeah.
And so the sovereign citizens have this. If you don't know what a sovereign citizen is, there are these people that basically believe the law is like, I don't even know how to describe it. It's like at some level it's laid down by some spiritual force, right? And there's all these and if you know the proper incantations to say, legal incantations, you can dodge any legal charge.
Yeah.
That's basic. That's the basic. So they'll drive without a license plate. And my favorite of these are the British people that do this, because the British people also have a sovereign citizen movement. And they will drive without a license plate. And then when they get pulled over 20 times a day for driving without a license plate, and they pull up this sheet and they said, because of this, this, and this, I am not subject to the license plate law because it is a mandate. And if you look up mandate in Black's Legal Dictionary, it says applies to a person. And if you look up person in Black's Legal Dictionary, which is the dictionary the U.S. law uses, there are two separate entries. One is a natural person, and the other is a jurisdictional person. And a jurisdictional person is what mandates apply to. And I'm not a jurisdictional person because it says any artificial entity. I'm a natural person because it says any living human naturally born. And and then the cop's heads the cop just wants to shoot them there for being that annoying.
Mm-hmm.
But right, I do find it is weird that there are three different definitions of what a person is in the U.S. legal dictionary, and two of them that most laws technically are written to are fictitious entities, like legal entities, and it even says fictitious entity in the thing. And the other one, a natural person, means basically what colloquially we would call person.
Okay.
Right? That's strange.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where they get a lot of this stuff. And they're like, we've been in a state of martial law since 1883. That's why the president, that's why the American seal has gold around it, because having gold around your emblem always meant you were, it's all nonsense, right? It's all crazy. But this idea of and I got to thinking about this because they always say, well, here's how you never answer a question with a question. Like the cop says, do you know why I pulled you over? And they go, here's what you say. You say, am I a living man? And the cop looks at you like, that's what, do you know how fast you're, and you say, am I a living man? And the cop looks at you again, and now he knows he's dealing with a crazy person, and he sighs internally. Because his day just got a lot harder for no good reason. Right? And he says, sir, just look, I pulled you over for speeding. And then he goes, am I a living man? And the cop goes, yes, sir, you are a living man. Then by the witness of two, all things are given proof. You agree that I'm a living man, and therefore this mandate does not apply to me as I am a natural born person and not a fictitious entity. And that's how it goes. But here's the thing. I think that, laws really are to deal, like if you think about the like let the dead bury their dead. The rule of Satan, of the world, is given jurisdiction because that's how people that are dead must be managed. Like there has to be all these laws, and there has to be all this coercion and force and stuff, because these people, they have to be controlled, and they want to be controlled because they're like dead entities. Like let the dead bury their dead. Because they believe, and I do too, they all believe lies, and they're operating in this realm of lies. Number one being that money is real. Right? Like because it isn't.
Sure.
Right? It is not real, and we all agree on this, and yet we never act like it, so we don't really agree. But money is it's more obvious in our system because we have a fiat currency, which is where you can just, it rolls off a printing press and then we say it has value, right? Mm-hmm. And they can do that, as we've seen recently in the coronavirus thing, they can just make it. Everybody gets $12,000. Here you go. It's like Monopoly money, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It is. I mean, the gold standard can confuse you and think like, oh, well, that's real, but also, the gold just has whatever value you ascribe to it. Like the value you're putting on the gold is also imaginary,
Right?
because you can't eat the gold. You can't. You know. So, and the other one is that this is what another thing sovereign citizens say is they refuse to use their quote slave name. They say like they'll pull you over like, are you Dave Smith? And they say you answer like Jesus did, and you say, you have said so.
I feel like this is an oppressed minority status program for white men.
No, it's something. There's a thing in there that's true, and they've just ran with it in the completely wrong direction. I've been trying to pull out what's true about it, but and I know people are like, "There's nothing true about it," but no, there is, because what they're saying in that is like, you're not you're. Because one of their points is if you take, and this is actually true, is that if you take a public defender, like in court, the court considers you a ward of the state because you're mentally insane.
Right.
And that's actually true. Because, like, let's say you take a public defender in court, and they say if you cannot provide a defense, the state will provide one for you. And then if you actually, like, dig down into how all that happened, it's like the people that couldn't provide their own defense are mentally insane. And so then they've classified everyone as mentally insane that does that, like from a legal realm, though no one really cognizes that that's what's happening, right? And so, and they're justified in doing that, really, because everyone is mentally insane. Because you say, "Are you Dave Smith?" and you're like, "Yeah, I'm Dave Smith," right? But like, it's like this is a little Buddhisty, but it's like, are you really? It's like you're believing all these fictions, like in the money, and in this sort of constructed identity for you, right? This is why God always gives you a new name. See what I mean? Like every time someone passes from the realm of the dead to the realm of the living in the Bible, they get their real name. Like Abram becomes Abraham, Simon becomes Peter, and so on and so forth. Is this making any sense?
It is. It kind of made me think, the dangers of propping up your civilization with too many lies is that it's a certain percentage of the population can't handle it, and they just check out. And the more lies are in it, the more people check out.
Right. And but yeah,
lies slash things that don't make any sense.
Yeah, it's like we do sort of live in a hologram. This is why people like simulation theory, because everything is so fake. Like I said at the beginning of the show, Helen Keller was fake. Everything is so fake that it feels they live in fakeness so long they begin to feel like they're not real. Like about Helen Keller, she did not write all those books. She existed. She was blind and deaf, but blind and deaf people do not write all these books in these different languages. And suspiciously, all of her books publication stopped after Anne Sullivan, her caretaker, died.
Yeah.
And so really it was like she was Coco the gorilla, who her caretaker said, "Oh, Coco can speak sign language." And they said, "Really? Let's see." And she said, "Yeah, here you go." And they look at it and they go, "That doesn't look like sign language." She said, "Well, it's a special gorilla sign language that only she and I know." And because making human sign language is hard for gorillas. And they're like, okay, really?" And she's like, "Yeah, ask her a question." And they're like, "Coco, how are you feeling today?" And then, Jane Goodway or whatever her name would wave her hands and go, "Ooh, ooh." And the monkey would do some hand motions. And she said, "Oh, she feels sad." And that's really what was happening with Helen Keller.
Yeah.
Which is very depressing, that she was being used in that way. And also all of her writings, all of Helen Keller's writings were like pro-socialist, pro-communist agenda stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They always do this. They get a sob story and they make some miraculous claim about it, and then all the message really is it's yay communism.
It really doesn't make sense anymore from what we know about human development and what happens to a person if they are deprived of sight and sound from birth.
Well, she wasn't from birth. This is their out. She was at 2 or 1 year old or something. She got some disease. But still it would definitely mess up your development.
Mm-hmm. You're not going to be writing political and economic books.
No.
Yeah.
No. Anne Sullivan was a big liar. That's my take on that one. But yeah, so anyway, there's something about the living and the dead. And this is why, let the dead bury their dead. This is why give to Caesar what is Caesar's. This is maybe why Jesus never deals with the Pharisees by answering their questions, because he's always asking the questions in return. Because it gets weird. There's something to the sovereign citizen nonsense, but not very much. But anyway, so I guess I'm gonna, because I don't know how to talk about that. I'm gonna talk about Valiant Thor. Because I was thinking
that was us not talking about it.
That was us not talking about it.
Okay.
Because I haven't yet figured out. I'm gonna come back to that and revisit that.
Okay, it sounds good.
Well, what gets me, this is the thing that got me looking into it, is that some of the times these people, it works. And I don't understand. Because they're like, am I a living man? And then it's like, I guess you don't have to pay taxes. These people do these insane things, and then somehow they do get through the system in these weird cracks. And I'm like, well, what's going on there?
You just imagine the judge, he goes home at the end of the night and he pours himself 4 fingers of whiskey, and it's like chain smoking cigarettes. And what does this all mean? What does this all mean? How do I even go to work tomorrow?
The guy gets up there. He's brought in on charges of not paying taxes in 5 years. And they say, okay, Mr. Smith. And he goes, that's not my name.
Yeah.
He goes, what do you mean, Mr. Smith? And he goes, I do not answer to my slave name.
Well, it's a pretty effective
my
debate
name is
tactic.
Klaatu,
Is you just attack every single presupposition of your opponent before they can even make their point.
So I don't know. Maybe we all need to learn sovereign citizen jiu-jitsu to get so Kamala Harris won't arrest us. But I don't. So I was watching sci-fi movies, classic sci-fi movies. I was watching 2 of them from the 50s. Okay. One was Forbidden Planet, and the second one was The Day the Earth Stood Still. Have you seen either of these?
I've seen The Day the Earth Stood Still.
Okay, good.
It's been a while, though.
Yeah. First thing you realize is that the 50s had pretty good special effects. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's better than you would think. The Forbidden Planet is in color, even though it was 1957. Mm-hmm. It's Technicolor. And there's all these there's laser beams, and there's a plant. There's it's like a plant. The human flying saucer flying around some planets in space, and it looks pretty good. I mean, it doesn't look hokey. It's not as good as you could do today, but it's pretty good.
Sure.
Which I thought was interesting. And the second thing you realize when watching movies from the 50s is just how sort of low-key horny everybody was all the time. Because the Forbidden Planet is all about they go to this planet, and it's the ship of men, and there's one woman on this planet, and the whole movie revolves around her almost being undressed. The whole movie, and a loss of innocence because she's never been around people, right? But also these movies deal with really complex, you really get this in watching 50s sci-fi and 60s sci-fi that we have downgraded in human capacity since then, because they had the big monster of Forbidden Planet is the human id, the ego and the id, because they it's this whole convoluted thing. But anyway, they're on this planet, And the guy that was there before them, they came to rescue him and his ship. He's the only one. Him and his daughter are the only one there, and his daughter's the hot one. And the aliens that built the planet beforehand have a machine to make all your desires, your mental desires, come true. And so he doesn't like the men getting fresh with his daughter, and so then all these things happen because of his mind, and he starts murdering people. Anyway, it's a pretty advanced take because it's like a psychological thing, a technological thing, and some guy named, I think his name was Morbius or whatever on the ship. Morbius and Klaatu, the two heroes. Mm-hmm. And The Day the Earth Stood Still is about a saucer coming down to Earth, and he's very upset about human beings discovering nuclear power because they only have the atom bomb. And he says, you're going to blow up other planets and we have to stop you. And if you don't, we're going to have retribution on you. You must learn the interstellar ways of peace and love. And like in so many science fiction things, the aliens are exactly the same as us. They just live on a different planet. But what you don't know about The Day the Earth Stood Still is that there was a real day the Earth stood still.
Really?
Mm-hmm. It was as described to us by Reverend Dr. Frank Stranges.
Ah.
In fact, his book, which was republished in the 90s, they get around the fact that the plot of it is basically exactly The Day the Earth Stood Still, mm-hmm. by saying The Day the Earth Stood Still. Which is a great marketing trick. You say, you just get out in front of it. So I'm going to take this. I'm going to tell you guys, because you need to know about Valiant Thor. Because if you go in UFO circles, you're going to hear about Valiant Thor. Mm-hmm. But you got to be careful because Valiant Thor is not real. But so anyway, so in the 50s and 60s, and I got a lot of this research from Aaron Gullius and his great show, The Saucer Life, which I encourage you all to go see. But so almost everything we know about Frank in his early life comes from the eulogy his sister gave at his funeral, right? Okay. In like 2012 or something, 2008. And what we really know is that his parents were garlic knots. They were immigrants from Italy. Mm-hmm. Already a red flag. Yeah. Right? So in 1959, and that's basically all we know about him, is that his parents were from Italy. But in 1959, Frank and his father established the International Evangelism Crusades. Right? So he came from an established line of like religious standard grifter. Mm-hmm. A big tent revival man who doesn't believe a word of it and is only in it for the money, so that kind of guy. Right. And also the same year, he and his father established the International Evangelism Crusades. He burst onto the UFO scene with his book called Flying Saucer Rama.
I think I would have picked a better name.
But it fits in perfectly with the 1950s sort of sci-fi, which was just a lot of gee whiz bang zip woo. Have you heard of flying saucers? Pew pew pew. They're great. That was like 1950s sci-fi. It was right in the Pulp Fiction sensationalized sci-fi of the time.
Buck Rogers.
Yeah, I mean it sort of made sense. I mean, people in the 50s had big dreams. Because if you're say you're an old person in 1950 and you were born in like 1880. Yeah. 1860. You'd seen planes just go for explode across the planet, nuclear bombs, missiles. You had the beginnings of computers. People had televisions. I mean, things were rapidly changing. Yeah, and there really seemed to be no limit, right? Mm-hmm. And so, like on the one side, 1950s, they were like leave it to beaver families, but the other side of the 1950s psyche was Forbidden Planet, Toward the Unknown, and On the Threshold of Space, this sort of entertainment. Mm-hmm. And also the ones that were, like I said, just pure sort of low-key horny, or not even low-key, but stuff like Catwomen on the Moon is a very popular one. Yeah. Or Zombies in the Stratosphere, which was another great one. So anyway, Flying Saucer Rama just fits right into all that. It's like bang zoom, look, aliens, woo. And so that gets pretty popular.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just basically like a list of stories of UFOs that he's come across. Frank's next pamphlet or publication was a little pamphlet, right? In the great American tradition of being a pamphleteer, going all the way back to Tom Paine and to more recently the Chick Tracts. His publication was called My Friend from Beyond Earth in 1960. And it describes what happened in December 1959. And in My Friend from Beyond Earth, it sort of lays the groundwork for his primary book, which still resounds today, Stranger at the Pentagon. All right, so in this book, in this pamphlet, he describes his first meeting with a being who would come to fame and prominence that we would now know as Valiant Thor, or Val Thor for short. So in 1959, he was giving a talk. This is his claim in the pamphlet. He was doing an evangelist crusade talk. And this is the thing about Frank Strange, if you listen to him, all of his speech sounds like a Southern Baptist minister.
Yeah.
He's talking about sin and, like, you know, the need for repentance and getting right with God. And then, like, every 4 hours of talk, he goes, and the beings from beyond earth are watching. And, like, when you listen, you think, oh, he's talking about, like, aliens or something. I mean, angels.
Mm-hmm.
But no, he's talking about aliens. Like, really, his whole evangelism is based around there are non-fallen versions of humans which live on the other planets who are trying to help us. Right. So, which I'll get into was not a weird belief at the time. So,
it was not a weird belief at the time?
No, in fact, it's something C.S. Lewis toyed with.
Well, that's very interesting.
I know. It's and maybe something that people in the past, like in medieval ages, toyed with too.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll see. So anyway, he says he's giving this evangelism crusade in D.C. And so he says, quote, in his words, there was a, quote, born-again Christian of sound mind in a high position in the Pentagon who came up to meet him. And the man said, quote, he couldn't name for, again, quote, obvious reasons, which is always how it works in UFO books. I can't tell you who it is for reasons. The reasons are not obvious, but he says they're obvious reasons. Anyway, this guy tells him that he takes him to the Pentagon because he wants him to meet this man. And the man is very humanoid, perhaps even human. And he claims to be from the other side of our telescope, who's in close contact with officials from the Pentagon. And he may even live at the Pentagon building for a while. It's not clear.
Mm-hmm.
It's this spaceman. Now, why would a spaceman be interested in talking to a traveling slick-tongued revival preacher, instead of anyone else on the planet? Not clear. It's not clear, but that's who he picks. Because the Pentagon guy that's at the revival is very impressed by Strangeness, I guess, so he wants him to meet the spaceman. So in the second chapter of the pamphlet, which you can still find, I think in PDF form online, he says he's ushered into a room in the Pentagon with 3 desks. And now on one desk, there's this army brass doing paperwork, who just completely ignore him. They never lift their eyes to look at him or whatever. And then there's another man, like he's like, doing other army stuff. And then there's a third guy who's standing by himself looking out the window. And he slowly turns around, and Strangeness says, it was as though he looked straight through me. With a smile and a hand outstretched in a gesture of friendliness, he started approaching me and greeted me in a handshake. The man's hand was soft and smooth like that of a baby, but extremely strong and firm nonetheless. He had brown eyes and brown hair, tan, but no fingerprints. Hello, Frank, he says, a strong, mellow voice full of character and purpose. So the no fingerprints thing, Frank, because Frank also brings up at this point that he'd been a special investigator.
Mm-hmm.
Of what? We don't know. What was he investigating? Was he with the police? He never makes that claim. He says, I was a special investigator. And so he says, I immediately noticed this man had no fingerprints because I knew how important fingerprints were. And so I asked him, I said, what about your fingerprints? And the spaceman laughs and goes, huh, fingerprints are a sign of fallen man. Fingerprints mark a man all through his life. So there you go. If you ever get in an argument with an atheist about the validity of original sin, you just go, but fingerprints. Right?
It's a sure death stroke to any objection.
Open and shut case. Take that, St. Augustine, big dummy. He wrote a whole book trying to justify for the idea of fallen man. He like 3 books, and all he could have gone was fingerprints.
Right.
Right.
You know.
So this is I don't know if this is just, like I said, I don't know if this is sort of just in the wider, a seed in the wider culture, whatever. But the idea, this basic idea of basically human creatures or just flat out humans on other planets, like in our solar system or around the galaxy, all likewise made by God, but the fall only happening to and affecting our planet is not something Frank came up with or something Valiant Thor came up with. In fact, that's the premise behind C.S. Lewis's 1938 novels, Out of the Silent Planet. Right. Which is the first of his space trilogy that he wrote in a pact with Tolkien, because Tolkien and Lewis got together and they said, let's write a trilogy together. I'll write one, you write one. And we'll do one on space and one on time. And they flipped a coin, and Tolkien got time and C.S. Lewis got space. And Lewis wrote his, and Tolkien couldn't stop talking about orcs long enough to write his. So he abandoned Lewis in that and never did it. Jerk. Because he was trying to start writing about time, and then he'd be like, and then Galadriel got the ring from Venus in the year, and then I'm just writing Lord of the Rings again. And so he failed. He didn't hold up his end of the bargain, but Lewis did. But that idea was sort of there. Like the idea that the effects of the fall are confined to this planet and don't extend out from beyond it. Because, it's like the Bible says Satan's the ruler of this world. Right. And when you put that together with the more archaic notion that stars are angels, then you got to start to think like, well, the other stars are ruled by other angels that didn't fall necessarily. Right. And so maybe their planets, like our ruling angel, Lucifer, fell taking his planet with him, but the other ones maybe didn't. Right. Sure. That's sort of the line. And then you find that idea pop up here and there throughout Christian sort of history. Like if there are other worlds, and before people really talked about planets, but like other worlds where man didn't fall. Right. It's sort of a theme. It's not a very big theme, but it's there. But anyway, that's what Strangus is working with. Val has come. He's a non-fallen human. He doesn't die. He doesn't age. He doesn't have fingerprints. Right. So, and they're always, and again, in 1950s sci-fi, they're all like, it's this crossover because you're talking about all this materialism, science stuff, but they're also always talking about God and religion. Right in the 50s. Like in the Forbidden Planet, when they first get to the planet, they're all looking through the window of the spaceship. And the captain says to the crew, the Lord sure made some beautiful worlds, didn't he? Like this. Like they're like talking about like evolution and materialism and stuff, but they also still have God in there too. It's this crossover point in the culture because you see that in Forbidden Planet also. Forbidden Planet, the guy comes down and his name is Klaatu. I mean, not Forbidden Planet, but the day the Earth stood still, his name is Klaatu, and he's like, "Hey, you guys are not living in commands with in accordance with the demands of the divine Creator." And we do, and we live to be 300 years old or whatever, and we have a giant robot named Gork who's here to destroy you if you don't start obeying the commandments. So you got this. So there's this Val Thor, and he's there, and he's saying, you guys fell and we didn't, and I'm here to help you get back to normal. So Frank says he noticed that he goes, the spaceman is basically wearing the same sort of clothes he is, like normal 1950s clothes. And he notes he finds that a bit strange. He was expecting something more exotic, And then the spaceman says, oh, well, that's because I changed out of my regular clothes before you arrived to allow the military to run exhaustive tests on the garment. He then goes to his cabinet and retrieves the garment, which is like a one-piece affair that glitters and shimmers in the sunlight, And the spaceman brings it to him, and Frank spends an inordinate amount of time describing this piece of cloth. Like 4 chapters.
Whoa.
Like he just it almost makes you think Frank was gay, even though because he just goes on and on about this, even though he had a wife again, but this fashion stuff.
Yeah. Space fashion.
But Frank says it looked like liquid sunlight. And the spaceman says it's made of material not on Earth, and it withstand heat beyond temperatures of the sun without even getting the cloth warm. Nor can any acid harm it, nor even could a diamond point drill puncture it. In one piece, all the way down to the boots, no zippers, buttons, or straps. It was held together by, quote, an invisible force.
Ooh.
Stranger says he doesn't see any sort of threads or anything else that like how it was put together, right? Anyway, the spaceman goes on after the diatribe about his cloak. And he says he's come to Earth to, quote, help man return to the Lord. He says God is displeased with the way men are going at the moment on Earth, but this can still be reversed. He also says he's been here for 3 years, and he's about to depart next year in March 16th, 1960. He could not force anyone to take his help or advice. He could only do it peacefully. And unfortunately, only a few world leaders have been open to his advice so far. The spaceman, which is just what happened in The Day the Earth Stood Still, which is that Klaatu comes and he gives them all like a plan for world peace and sufficiency of all needs. And like, here's how we can give everyone what they need. And the president goes, this will wreck the economy. And then he wads up the paper and throws it out the window. This is the plot. Which isn't that unbelievable.
Yeah, that's pretty realistic writing. Yeah.
It's the most realistic thing in that movie. But so and Val Thor says the same stuff. And Val Thor expresses that he feels a little dejected because I've got to leave soon. And there's still so much to get through. And he makes it sound like in fact, he goes on to say that there's 70 Venusians on the planet at any time.
Mm-hmm.
They intermingle with us, and they do go on rotations. So like they do a 3-year mission like the Mormons down to Earth, and then they go back, and another Venusian comes down and takes their place. So the spaceman has a wealth of knowledge about everything, science, God, and interestingly about Frank. The spaceman says in the pamphlet that Frank's book, Flying Saucer-Rama, couldn't have been written without, quote, divine inspiration, and that it would very soon be read throughout the whole world. So there you go. Not only does Frank tell us the solution to original sin, which is you don't have fingerprints, but he makes the offhand claim that a spaceman who is an unfallen human says to him that his own Flying Saucer-Rama is basically scripture.
It's pretty worked out well for him.
It did.
Yeah.
So then he goes back home, and he says his pamphlets. He says he debated for a long time, even telling the story in his pamphlet, because they're like, who's going to believe me? And will the government get mad at telling me or whatever? But then he says, I prayed about it and decided to publish the whole truth on the matter because, quote, as Jesus said, the truth shall set you free. And that's his reasoning. So that's the pamphlet. So the next place Strangeness appears is an article titled "Preacher, What About the UFOs?" in the July 1961 issue of Flying Saucer, the popular UFO magazine.
Right.
Back when there were magazines, and back when there were magazines of sufficient quantity that one could be about UFOs. And this article, he says everything in this article I sort of agree with. He basically tackles the questions of, should preachers in the pulpit talk about UFOs? Are there UFOs in the Bible? And what's the biblical take on aliens and so on? And Frank's answer to this question is basically the reason we started this show, which is that people do see weird things and therefore we should talk about them. Otherwise, if we don't have answers for them, they'll go somewhere else and they'll get led astray into these weird, new age stuff.
Yeah.
Which is basically the reason we started this show.
I would agree with that.
So he's right. He's right. I mean, but his issue is, that he's claiming that Flying Saucer-Rama is part of the Bible. That's the main issue with Frank. So he says, yeah, you should talk about UFOs from the pulpit. He doesn't say what you should say. It's really not and Frank being this way, like being sort of an evangelical tent revivalist who also talks with aliens, the Pentagon,
Mm-hmm.
makes him not really gel with the existing UFO culture at the time, right? Mostly, and that's for two reasons. One, because he's a tent revivalist, which has always sort of been on the outside,
Right.
but also because he was a contactee. And the UFO mainstream has never really liked contactees.
Mm-hmm.
Because contactees are different from abductees, because abductees give you these nice, juicy stories where they're like taken against their will and probed sexually on a ship and they see their dead loved ones and all this stuff. You know, you can write books about that. The contactees are always like, you know, the Space Brothers came down, they got a beautiful message of love and light.
Right.
And it just so happened that they also said, I'm of central importance to the world. And
well, they're like a prophet that hasn't been validated by a miracle.
Right.
You can't really trust them. There's no proof that what they're saying is true.
Right. So NICAP, which was the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, which is the precursor to the modern version of MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, which, you know, they if you ever need a spare time job, go on MUFON and they'll make you, as they will make anybody without any qualifications, into a UFO investigator.
Sweet.
For your local area. But NICAP, they published some sort of scathing articles about him, you know. And in response, because you don't do that to some guy that just forms organizations on the fly as easily as Frank Stranges is able to. So in response to the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena slandering him, Frank starts the National Investigations Committee on Unidentified Flying Objects. So NICAP, and he says, oh yeah, well, if I can't be a NICAP, I'm a NICUFO. If I can't be a NICAP, I'm in NICUFO. I'll start my own group with almost exactly the same name as yours. And you know what? Of the two, Frank Stranges is the only one that still exists. So, I mean, NICAP turned into MUFON, but it sort of underwent a death and resurrection. But
right.
NICUFO still exists and is still basically, if you go to their website, it's basically just turned into a cult about Frank Stranges, where they hawk his books at you and tell you to say the Ring of Fire prayer, which is a prayer invoking the Holy Spirit against aliens that he came up with, that he said Thor gave him. But they're still there, you know. So I guess that's a win for Frank. So then by the late 60s, Strange hooks up with a guy named Raymond Broshears.
Mm-hmm.
And Raymond was an interesting fellow. He was heavily involved in all of the early JFK assassination conspiracy theories. Cool. Like in the very early years. Like he's the guy, Raymond Broshears was the guy, but like, grassy knoll.
Yeah.
What about the grassy knoll? You know, and then the motorcade, and then he's the guy that started all that. He framed the JFK conspiracy world. And he later then moved out to California and became a fringe religious leader and gay rights activist and whatever. And so then Broshears, this is why this stuff is fun, because these people's lives.
The characters are incredible. Yeah.
You don't meet people like this anymore. Where are these people? Everyone's just trying to TikTok.
Dude, you're these people.
I know. Or maybe. Everyone is so flat now. You know, like everyone's flattened out. They all have the same monoculture, and everyone's just TikToking. And
yeah, the internet did it to us.
It's like Tim Dillon said, there's only two jobs left in the future. One is being a cam girl, and the other is stoking the race war. There's the two jobs left. There's nothing. Everyone could just be those two things.
Which one are you going to be?
That's the thing. I'm trying to carve out a different path.
Okay,
you know?
good.
I'm trying to carve out a different path. But anyway, so then Frank Stranges writes really his magnum opus, Stranger at the Pentagon, in which he basically fleshes out this meeting that he had with Val Thor, and then subsequent meetings with Val Thor throughout his life.
Right.
And so the book he goes through and so then the book opens with him in this initial meeting at the Pentagon. Then he says, and then Val and I maintained a relationship throughout my whole life. And he comes to me sometimes, and he tells me new updated things about what the Venusians are doing, and a new message from God and whatever, right? And so every edition, this book gets republished every like 5-10 years with a new edition throughout his life. And it always has a few more stories added into the end because Val Thor has visited him in the interim between then and the last edition, right? So, are you still there?
I'm here.
Okay.
Sorry,
so
my
anyway,
video's frozen.
That's okay. The book gets longer every year because he gets more. Now, so basically, the book, by the time it was finished and he died, he's not getting any more transmissions from Val Thor.
Right.
The book has basically turned into like a biography of snapshots of Strange's life. Like, and then I was skiing in the mountains and Val Thor showed up and he told me that we really needed to pursue renewable energy. And then like a few years later, I was sitting at my home nursing my sick foot, and Val Thor knocked on the door and he came in and he told me about how God feels about the Apocrypha and so on and so forth, right? It becomes this like rolling thing of snapshots of Frank Strange's life, like these important moments in his own life, and then Val Thor shows up. Now, strangely, what doesn't get into his autobiography is the time that he was arrested, him and another fellow arrested for flying a plane across America filled with 500 pounds of marijuana.
Awesome.
That doesn't make it into the biography for some reason. But he did a little bit of time in jail for that. I don't know if Val Thor visited him in jail. He doesn't bring it up.
I feel like he's a prototype John McAfee character. All of a sudden, yeah.
So anyway, now here's an so he writes Strange at the Pentagon, and he gets a guy named Harley Bird to write the foreword. And Harley Bird is qualified to do this because he claims that he was working for the Air Force's Project Blue Book at the time, right?
I was wondering when Blue Book was going to plug into this.
He was working on Project Blue, and he was there for the initial landing of Thor.
Right.
Like when Val Thor landed, Harley Bird was there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And here's the thing about Harley Bird. Who else do you know in this sphere named Bird?
I don't know. No, nobody.
Harley Bird was the nephew of the famous Richard Byrd, the Navy pilot and explorer of the South Pole, who will be the subject of a future episode, right? Who is famous in all different Earth conspiracies and also in esoteric Antarctic Nazism. Because he was a naval explorer for the Navy, and he flew his plane over the Antarctic, and famously in his radio transmissions back, he said, he basically says something like, there's a different world over here. There's a whole world we didn't know about. And he describes, basically his radio transmissions make it sound as though, even though if you really read them, he just sounds like he's talking about Antarctica. But it make it sound as though on the first pass, he's talking about flying over Antarctica and discovering a whole new like continent beyond the shores of Antarctica.
Mm-hmm.
That is not icy, but is green. And this is where flat earthers get a lot of their maps. This is where the Hollow Earth people come in because so Richard Byrd sort of didn't deny it. Like he sort of made it sound like he flew into the Hollow Earth.
Right.
So anyway, this is the nephew of that guy.
Interesting.
So Harley Bird says, in mid-March 1957, we answered an urgent message from the Alexandria Police Department. 2 of their on-duty officers had picked up an alien who had landed some 14 miles south of the Pentagon. He was taken to the Pentagon to meet Eisenhower and Vice President Richard Nixon. The alien's name was Valiant Thor. Bird states also that the Valiant Thor's official title from the government was Space Emissary. So now you know what the government title is for Venusians to visit. Space
Sweet.
So the rest of the forward doesn't give a whole lot of verifiable information, stuff you could cross-check. But what it does give is wrong. The officials he notes in the forward that supposedly met with Val Thor either have no record of existing at the Pentagon or they did exist, but they existed and served their terms like a decade before or after this 1957 event. You know, so right off the bat, we got some problems. In the forward, there's some problems. You know, and anyway, the book goes on to tell us that Thor's people have been observing Earth and its people for centuries. And in 1945, they finally sent 100 ships to surround the Earth to save us from a nuclear chain reaction that would have killed us all. So, if the story goes that if Val Thor and his Venusians hadn't been there, and we blew up Nagasaki and Hiroshima, it would have set off a nuclear chain reaction in the atmosphere to kill the whole world. But they saved us using their technology.
That's nice of them. Yeah.
Right, which is that was a big thing, and still is really, the UFO nuclear connection. I mean, the lore goes that the UFOs are keeping us from nuclear destruction.
Okay.
Which is not out of. I mean, the most UFO sightings that the military actually wrote down and like are public are about UFOs hovering around nuclear facility sites and before nuclear testing, and a lot of them say there's like 7 of them, both from America and Russia, by the way, during the Cold War, which said they were about to test a nuclear bomb, and some light showed up in the sky, and all of their electricity things turned off. Like, brrr.
Ooh, so that's an issue. I was talking to my canoeing buddy yesterday about how the it's odd that mutually assured destruction appeared to have worked, and that we didn't nuke the whole planet during the Cold War. And it just seems a little surprising to me.
Well, now you know how it worked.
It was really the aliens. Got it.
Right. Well, all of World War II and the Cold War, the UFO World War II connection is worth a show on its own, and also the Cold War. That's where Foo Fighters come from. You know the band Foo Fighters?
Yeah.
Foo Fighters were the term that American pilots in World War II gave to the phenomena of them flying around, and they would look out their window and they'd see these lights keeping pace with their plane.
Ooh, yeah.
And the Germans saw the same thing, as did the Russians. Everyone with fighter planes, they would get these Foo Fighters. They had different names for them, but that's where the Foo Fighters come from. Anyway, back to Stranger at the Pentagon. He meets Nixon and Eisenhower, and Val with other members of his crew during this initial landing. His crew members are named Dawn, Jill, and Tanya. Those are the names of people. So you got Valiant Thor, and then Dawn, Jill, and Tanya.
Seems like the naming is a little inconsistent.
He got lazy. So anyway, then they go on and they meet another famous contactee at the time named Howard Minger, who should also have his own show. He wrote the famous book about the Venusian space brothers with blonde hair and blue eyes called From Outer Space to You. And at this time, Minger was holding a UFO meeting in New Jersey, like a club, where they get around. They talk about UFOs in a local chapter. And there were pictures taken from this event. And so Strange takes some of these pictures and claims that 4 of the people in those photos are actually the Venusians he's describing: Val, Thor, Dawn, Jill, and Tanya. They look like normal people. No one has been able to tell who they are. One of them has like a navy buzz cut, and he's handsome. He said, that's Val Thor. Right? And the rest of them, like Tanya just looks like a lady wearing a blouse. Dawn is slightly balding, So
you take a risk when you produce a photo of your aliens. Right. I mean, that's these rolling the dice on that.
Yeah. So anyway, there's pictures of Val Thor that exist, and one way to immediately falsify this is if you could tell who those people really were in those pictures, but no one's been able to so far. So Strange then asked Thor about Jesus and what he thought about sacrifice and resurrection and his passion and the Bible. And he asked Val Thor whether or not they even have Bibles on Venus. And Val replies, they have no need of a book since they never lost their original connection with Jesus. And Val then says he expresses his bemusement to learn that men on Earth were trying to discredit God and claim he didn't exist, when in Val Thor's words, that God was at the very same time supplying them with all good things.
Yeah.
And so so this basically he develops a cult following. He makes a little UFO cult out of this. And as I said, he's which we should edit this into the show later because he actually recorded this and it's on YouTube now. he comes up with a ring of fire ceremony.
Yep.
Which the Venusians gave him. I don't know if you have that pulled up.
I do. Do you want me to play it, or you want me to pipe it in later?
Let's pipe it in later because I'm gonna lose my train of thought. But
Can
later,
do.
so right here, boom, ring of fire ceremony.
Okay. All right. That's all I have right now. God bless you. And I think we should be prepared now to do the ring of fire. All stand, please. Make a huge... Be prepared for the inner circle ring of fire ceremony. Stretch out that circle so you can join hands. I feel tremendous power in this room today, so expect the unexpected. Expect something wonderful to happen to you. Will you do that? Repeat after me, please. Eternal Father, Creator of the universe, hear this hour my earnest prayer. Anoint my lips, my ears, my mind, and my heart with your divine flame of fire. Provide me now with perfect health, abundance, and longevity. Revitalize and redirect my energies into divine service. Touch me with your divine inner flame of fire and cause me to be the master that you intended me to be. In the blessed name of the Master and Creator of the universe, the Lord Jesus Christ. So be it. Amen. Release your hands, please, and turn to this flame. I hope all of you will be able to see it. Put yourself in a position where you can see this flame. Watch this fire. And as we have in times past, I want you to concentrate and put your thought into gear. Look into that flame. Can you see the flame from where you're standing? If you can't, move over, please. Tom, step over here. I want everybody to see the flame. And put your thoughts in gear. Look into that flame and spiritually, mentally, put all of your desires, everything that you desire in life, all the good things of life, put that desire in the flame. And the moment the flame is extinguished and the smoke begins to rise as a testimony in the nostrils of God, when that flame goes out, it means that you have faithfully placed all of your hopes and dreams and desires into the flame, and as soon as smoke rises, it means that it's a testimony that your prayers are answered. All of this, according to your faith in Almighty God. How many of you agree? Say aye. Aye. Look into the flame. We're going to extinguish it now, and as it does, see in your third eye the end of all of your troubles. You got it? Repeat after me. I see the end of all my troubles in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. There it is. There goes the smoke. In the Old Testament, they offered burnt sacrifices to Jehovah. And the smoke rose from the desk of the temple through the roof in the tent or the temple. And God recognized it as the smoke rose as a testimony to the faith of the people that He heard and answered their prayers. God bless you. Please be seated. I feel good today, don't you?
He says, he gives to the inner circle of Nick Ufo, which confers divine protection upon the performer of the ceremony to protect you from demonic influences such as the Men in Black.
Ooh.
So there you go. We don't have a Patreon, but we really deserve one, because how many other podcasts show you how to do rituals to protect yourself from the Men in Black? Or let you know about the fingerprints and that being evidence of your fallenness. I mean, how much is that worth? It's like worth infinite money, basically.
At least $50 a month.
You're getting it for free.
Yeah. Little appreciation is all we're asking here.
Yeah. So that's the life and times of Frank Stranges, who we all try to emulate. I think you know, and I think he would have something to say about the realms of the living and the dead, and certainly a man that was on solar level, if anybody was. That was a very forced segue to bring it back around, but
it still, you know, it tied it all together, sort of.
Yeah, when you do a podcast, guys, here's the thing: you got to tie it all together. You got to make the ribbon neat.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's very easy to do,
mm-hmm.
and sometimes there's no obvious thread connecting Frank Stranges and Valiant Thor to someone screaming at a police officer, Am I a living man? But you gotta find that thread anyway.
I'm gonna start using that in disagreements with my wife and children.
Well, yeah, because because they only get 3. The idea of the guys, the sovereign citizens, is that if you make a claim, you have to back up the claim.
Mm-hmm.
But if you never make a claim, they don't have anything to hold you to it. So they say, "Are you Steve Smith?" And if you say, "I am Steve Smith," now you have to back that up. But if you just say, "Am I a living man?" Right? Or if you say, "Do you know how fast you were going?" and you say, "Is the speed mandate applied to natural persons or jurisdictional persons?"
It seems like somebody tried to make a legal strategy out of Obi-Wan Kenobi waving his hand and saying, "These are not the droids you're looking for."
Right, and that's exactly what it is. But I can't get over how often it seems to work, which is why I look like these guys are walking around. They're driving around without license plates.
Yeah.
Go zipping up and down the highway, not paying taxes, and somehow they're not in jail.
Does it actually work, or do people just say they make up experiences with police and they make up victories?
They usually a lot of them videotape themselves doing it.
Uh-huh.
And you can find them videotape. They got their iPhone on, and they're talking to the police officer, and they're just going, "Am I a living man? Am I a living man?" And it's like natural, and they start citing definitions of persons and what a corporation is. And then the police officer's like, "Sir, I'm just trying to give you a parking ticket. I don't know what you want from me." And so maybe it works because the police officers just don't want to deal with that today.
I get the feeling that might be it. If this worked in a courtroom, I'd be impressed. But I guess we'll discover that in our research.
There's some of it working in a courtroom. I don't
really.
But maybe it's because they just decide this person is too insane to actually be held to anything. It could be. They're like this. Well, you can't blame like a Down syndrome person for not paying his taxes when he lives by himself. He's just not capable.
Well, one of those dudes a few years ago in New Hampshire had a siege with the federal agents because he hadn't paid his taxes in so many years, and they decided to finally take him down. It was kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
I was sad. I was sad for him.
Yeah, so he obviously didn't do the proper incantations.
Yeah. Legal magic, big legal magic.
Yeah.
You gotta do it right.
Yeah, right. And so yeah. Don't worry, you can all sleep sound. The Red Scare's not gonna happen. Kamala will put us in jail though.
Yeah, I think she will.
I'm not gonna protect you from that.
I don't want no President Harris. That's gonna be bad news for everybody.
We're all going to jail.
I'm not going to jail.
Am I a living man?
Am I a living man, Kamala?
I am not a jurisdictional person.
Camel, am I a living man? Camel, do you know the definition of a corporation?
I got onto this listening to Owen Benjamin the other day, and that guy. I sometimes I think about writing into his show, to his thing, because he answers letters online.
Yeah.
You know? And like telling him about our show and be like, I sometimes talk about the stuff you say, but some of the stuff he says is ridiculous, and then he'd get mad at me, and he'd spend like 2 episodes yelling at me and calling me gay, and then I'd say, yeah, okay, and then we'd make up, and then we'd be friends. But I don't know if I'm ready to go through that.
It's a big commitment.
Yeah, I gotta stop interrupting the exit thing.
Well, it might just become shtick. Okay, I'm really stopping the recording now. 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 I'm really stopping.